few weeks ago, I was on TikTok and I saw this video. It blew my mind, but maybe not for the reasons you're thinking. I think any musician watching this video can learn so much from this performance. Now, the person you just saw in that video is named Lennie, but you can find him on social media as Lenstrumental, and he's from Lawrence, Massachusetts. Not only does Lennie have an insane following on TikTok, but he's performed on Italia's Got Talent, The Jennifer Hudson Show, MTV, and a ton of other places because he's super talented.
You ready to show us something?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay, we paying attention.
Right.
And on the surface, it's really tempting to just watch this video and be like, wow, look what he can do with pins. But I think there's a lot more going on underneath the surface. As a professional drummer, I wanted to dive into what Lennie's doing in this video because you might be surprised to know that a lot of what he's doing while pin tapping in this video is the same stuff that professional musicians or any proficient musician would do on their instrument. So to get into the mind of Lennie, I started by transcribing, which means kind of writing out note for note his performance, which maybe means this is the first pin tapping transcription ever. I don't know. So here's my interpretation, the notation for what Lennie played in this video. So the first thing I think any musician can take away from looking at this performance is look at the table that he's performing on. In the dead center of the table, there's a tiny little circle where most of his pin tapping is happening. And then around that, in a slightly bigger kind of white areas on the table, you can see where he's swiping, but you can see that these are well-worn paths on the table. He's not just randomly hitting this table, like you can tell how consistent every stroke that he's hitting is, so much so that he's wearing down the table in the exact spot. This is the same thing that I actually tell like students to focus on when they're playing drums. Like when I look at their drum heads, I want to see like in the dead center of the drum, I want to see that most of your consistent shots are hitting there. Whether you're playing an instrument, playing drums, pin tapping, or shooting free throws, consistent motion is something that's going to lead to, you being able to repeat something time and time again, which that is a mark of a professional. A professional musician isn't just someone that owns the stuff and learn the music, but it's someone that can play at a high level every single night, night after night, no matter what the kind of setting is. Every time you show up your instrument, you're able to perform at a certain level, and that's only done through consistency and paying attention to your motions, making sure that you're doing repeatable motions. That's going to be a huge way that you can increase your kind of proficiency on an instrument. If you want a deeper dive into, consistent motions and stuff like that, I have a video on my channel from a few years ago. It's called Bass Drum Speed, and you can check it out in the link in the description. That is kind of a deep dive into foot technique. On that topic of consistency, it's not just his movements that are consistent, it's also his tone. And it feels kind of silly when you think about tone of pin tapping, but every single kind of right hand kick drum note he's playing sounds consistent. It's low, it's got, some articulation, but it's round, it's full, it's even the same pitch. And that has to do with how hard he's hitting the table, what part of the hand is meeting the table, and then his, kind of back beats with the pin. All of those are crisp, articulate, consistent. Same with the drumming he's doing with his fingers. All of those are crisp and consistent. It's not like some of them are buried and others are way louder. Like his tone is amazing. His tone is really, really consistent. And again, this is something that not enough musicians think about. Third thing that I want to point out that any musician can kind of learn from this video is Lennie's timing is amazing. Like no matter whether he's playing 64th notes or triplets or whatever, his timing is impeccable. And that's a huge part of making something feel good, making something, danceable, making something listenable, is having great timing. Great timing is what makes grooves, and this thing grooves. Even though it's just him tapping on a table with some pins, it really, really grooves. I talk a lot in kind of a deeper dive situation in a video I posted a couple of years ago called 3 timing exercises. So if you want to know more about how timing can improve your groove and your feel, like that video is a deep dive and I think you'll like it. In watching this performance, I was also kind of blown away by Lennie's ability to evoke a certain genre from what he was playing. In a lot of the posts that he makes on TikTok or YouTube and stuff, they're in the title or some hashtags, he'll often tag trap or drill or trap beats. And it's crazy because when you watch him play, that's what you think of. He's playing stuff that makes you think of trap and drill. And this is a good example of how genres aren't necessarily, tied to a specific sound. It's not about having the same clap sample as this other person. There's more to genre than that. Getting inspiration from people that don't play your instrument is like super, super enriching for your musicianship. I've played with producers and artists where they don't play bass. So when they program a bass part for someone to play, they actually use like a keyboard. And a keyboard player playing a bass part is going to approach it way differently than a bass player would, which kind of can be something that, still is in the genre, but it's from a different approach, from a different instrument's mindset. And oftentimes, some of that stuff is like some of the coolest stuff you get. Even though in these videos, Lennie is fulfilling the role of the drummer, as he's approaching the drum part from pins, it's just going to be a totally different approach than I would ever do it as someone who plays the drum kit. And I think it's really, really important to always kind of be like on the lookout for ways you can get inspiration like that, because it's a huge way to, like I said, enrich and expand your musicianship. And the fifth and last thing I think musicians can take away from this performance is musicianship is not about the gear you play. Like I said, Lennie has 2 pins and a table, and he's able to do this on not just the table in that video that seems to be at his house that he practices on a lot, which is why it's worn and stuff like that. But there's videos on YouTube of him doing it at school and doing it on the Jennifer Hudson show. Like, it doesn't matter where he is. He sounds like him no matter where he is. And I think that this is an important reminder that it's not about the gear. It doesn't matter who recorded what snare drum on that song you like. Chances are you have a snare drum that you can use, that if you mess around with the tuning, you mess around with the dampening, you hit it in a particular way, you don't bash it, you play it a little quieter, like whatever it is, chances are you can get that snare drum sound out of any snare drum you own. It's really, really tempting, especially when you pick up TikTok or Instagram and people are, posting about, I got this new snare drum or these new drumsticks or this cymbal and this guitar pedal and the whatever. It's really, really tempting to go, that will finally make me sound like whatever. And it's usually just not true. Lennie in this video is a good example of, it isn't about the gear you're using. If you want to sound good, you want to sound consistent, it's about all these other things we've talked about.